still, for me, the key concern has got to be the fact that share prices are still down hard at some of the competitors, even though many analysts would say there is nothing exactly out there like Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, I would say the fundamental question at this point is one of sentiment. Obviously, the Fed and other regulators moved to reassure depositors, right? Not even investors, but depositors. They lined up this new liquidity facility. They made it easier and less expensive, essentially, for banks to borrow from their discount window, the lender of last resort, right? But it's still unclear of whether or not that has managed to calm people down. It certainly hasn't calmed down investors, and I don't think we can yet say if it's calmed down depositors.
We find ourselves once again in a situation where there are more questions than answers, particularly, is there a buyer that's going to come in for SVB? What's happening with Signature? First Republic's response is pretty dramatic, even though it was so vocal about the strength, as it put it, of its liquidity position. Why is there still so much angst out there, Max, from the equity market reaction alone?
I think the fundamental issue is that Fed policy is still in place when it comes to interest rates. So even with these backstops, even with these countermeasures, people are still worried this problem will persist. I honestly can't say, though. I mean, again, when it comes to banking, the number one thing is confidence, right, and sentiment. And if both of those things are down just because you have these kind of back-to-back bank closures and failures, I think it's hard to win over hearts and minds.
Max, what are we hearing about Silicon Valley Bank and depositors' access to their cash this morning?
It sounds mixed from what I saw in our reporting. I unfortunately have not been as close to that as some of our tech reporters have been doing, a real bang-up job. Apparently, they are able to get access to it, right? And that was kind of the promise made. Depositors would be made whole. They'd be given access. And we are seeing that, though apparently there have been some hiccups. But again, I think the regulators have moved to give people access to their deposits, to fully backstop them. And that's, I think, what we're seeing play out this Monday morning.
And Max, ultimately, this came down to a massive counterparty risk that people hadn't quite factored in one sector. Will regulation change, do you think? As the administration promises it about banks, for example.
The big question, I think, is whether or not we'll see some kind of rollback or alteration to Trump-era moves that made it essentially less cumbersome, less burdensome on regional banks when it comes to capital requirements, when it comes to compliance requirements, whether or not we see a push to move away from that, to put in new regulations for those banks around capital is the question. I don't have the answers on that, unfortunately, but I think it would make sense to see some level of movement on that out of D.C.